And hello to everyone in the audience. Thank you all so much for joining us. Really excited to have you here. We do have the chat open, so do feel free to engage in the chat, to ask questions through it, and also with the Q&A here, the Q&A function. Feel free to drop questions in there, and then at the end we'll get to some Q&A. I'm excited about. Hi, Anna Lucia. I'm inviting you in. Wonderful. How's it going?
Good. How are you? Happy to be here.
Good. Glad to have you here too. I realize that I always call you by your first and last name, and I don't do that really with anyone else. So apologies if it feels very formal.
No, it's fine. It's my first and middle name, actually. I've got more used to it by being called fully Anna Lucia. Whatever is fine. Happy with all.
Yeah, they feel really nice. Good. Fantastic. Well, I think I believe Nadieh should be joining us as well. But I think in just a minute here we can go ahead and get started, because we will start with a bit about FairalFile 2.0 and a bit about the new drop mechanics and collecting that we're really excited to share with you all. I know that we've talked about it on Twitter a bunch and in like different chats and different conversations, but we are so lucky here today to have Sean Moss-Pultz with us. He's the CEO of Bitmark, and he's going to talk a bit about why we are doing what we're doing and how. So we'll get started here in just a moment. Just wait one more minute for Nadieh, and then we can get started. But everyone's on. This is wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining us. It's so nice to be with you all again. It's probably during those video sessions. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It's pronounced Nadieh.
Nadieh? Oh my
Nadieh.
gosh.
Yep.
Oh.
I learned that in the past couple of months as well.
Amazing.
I've been a fan of Nadieh's for maybe 4 or 5 years in the data visualization world, so it's been a lot of fun to work with her in this capacity. But it's pronounced Nadieh.
Nadieh. Good to know. Thank you. And Bart's just let us know that Nadieh could not make it, so that's great. So we can get started then. I mean, not great, but we can go ahead and get started. Fantastic. Well, hello and welcome everyone to the exhibition walkthrough of N=12. My name is Elisabeth Sweet, and I'm the communications lead at FairalFile. And it's my distinct pleasure to be with you all here today, hosting the first exhibition walkthrough in this new phase of the gallery. We are joined by several artists from N=12, including Elsif, Reva Fan, Anna Lucia, Peter Pasma, Bart Simons, Nicole Vella, and Lia Coleman, and Dan Catt, excuse me, sorry, and Dan Catt, and of course with their wonderful curator Aaron Penne. I'm also glad here to introduce my teammates from FairalFile and Bitmark. We have Sean Moss-Pultz, who's the CEO of Bitmark, and Casey Alt, who's head of product. And for a bit of context, Bitmark is the organization that partnered with Casey Reese to co-found FairalFile back in 2021. So we are so glad to have Sean here today to talk a bit about this new collecting period and the new way that we're running FairalFile 2.0 moving forward. So I'd like to pass it to Sean for just a moment to give us a bit of background and to introduce the new way that we're collecting here on FairalFile. So Sean, I'll let you take it away. Thanks.
Cool. I guess just kind of to make it even slightly more confusing. So I've known Casey Reese since probably 2002 or 3, something in that order. And then Casey Alt was an introduction from Casey Reese. Casey was actually a student of Casey Reese a decade or so ago. And so I've worked with Casey Alt for a long time, worked with Casey Reese for forever. And FairalFile is really like the meeting of the minds. It's been something that we've been talking about. How do you bring art to a lot more people? We've been talking about for a decade. And so blockchains and technology. I actually worked on an open source phone, and I wanted to use processing as the language to basically do the UI of the phone. It goes back that far. So we did FairalFile, and FairalFile came out really before, I would say, a lot of the expectations of how art that's using an NFT as like a distribution mechanism, as an authenticity and a provenance. It came out before a lot of these things were mature and people knew kind of what they wanted. And so you can think of Ferrophile 1.0 as an experiment. We tried all sorts of different methods, all kinds of different exhibitions, group shows, solo shows, shows where you had sets, shows where there was no sets. And we started to revisit like all of the things that we felt worked really well and the things that didn't. And then all of the things that we felt, okay, knowing everything we know now about this ecosystem, what would we do differently if we were starting from scratch? And so Ferrophile 2.0 is really just, okay, back to the basics, back to the roots. We love the dynamic of the group show. I got to watch the video. So I've seen bits and pieces of the video, but I haven't seen it all fit together. To see all of you talk about the show, it was just so special. It was so incredible for me to see that. That is exactly what, like, no, that's way better than I thought even possible. But that was the idea, is that we're better together. And the idea of Ferrophile 2.0 and the exhibition contracts, the way the smart contracts work, the way that all of the artwork is minted, it's really about a group coming together to produce something really meaningful. And the more radical thing we're trying now is that, well, the way you collect the artwork is you collect the show. Just like the artists in the show, this is how the collectors will collect the show. So this is an experiment for us, but I think I speak for Casey that we both really, we're very excited about this. And so tomorrow we'll get to see this for the first time.
Wonderful, thank you. Great. So if you have any questions about collecting sets and how that's going to work, feel free to either drop it in the Q&A, DM me through Zoom here, drop it in the chat, and then we'll collect them at the end and we can go over them in the Q&A. So now I would love to turn to the N=12 crew. And I really feel exceptionally lucky to have gotten to work with them over the last few weeks. You know, we're all so remote and everything's so virtual that witnessing the collaborative energy from these 13 individuals has really been a treat. You know, across 7 time zones, they met weekly, which I think is a feat in and of itself, truly. They met on a weekly basis to discuss their work and to develop the collection that you see that we're going to go over. Casey Alt is going to share his screen and show us the sets as we go through the exhibition. And so what I've learned from this group in the last few weeks is that they really, you know, they got vulnerable with each other and with their work and with sharing it, and it really paid off, not only in the pieces that you see, but in personal development and in, I think, probably what will be, you know, lifelong friendships or friendships far into the future. And you know, I was thinking about this, and we just had the retrospective, and one of the themes is artist to peer, is this exhibition that we did back in 2019 as the origin of Ferrophile. And I was thinking about this exhibition, and it's almost like it's artists to peer to friends, in sort of this really beautiful sequential way that really shows the collaboration and what can really come of this collaborative energy, especially around generative art, which is something that is you know, typically thought to be done in isolation. So excited to get more into that, to hear from the artists today. And before we do, I really want to congratulate Aaron Penne for his formidable leadership. Truly, working with Aaron has been amazing. He created and curated something really special here and noteworthy in the mediums of collaboration and generative art and even beyond. And I really think that what he's done here can be used as a model and a way to bring us all forward and maybe closer together in this sort of digital virtual world that we all live in. So I'd love to start with Aaron first and ask Aaron if he could please tell us a bit about the curatorial vision that brought us all here. Thanks, Aaron.
Certainly, it's very kind. It's been an absolute joy working with these artists. We've been working for the past 7+ months. The core idea of the show is basically, when you're an artist, you're creating artwork, it's a very personal, intimate, kind of isolated thing oftentimes. When you're a computer artist, you're working with a tool that is connected to the world. So your tool for creation that you're using by yourself in the middle of the night is also a tool for connection that can tie you directly to other people with the exact same overlap of interests or fears or desires. And so I think that's really interesting, this idea of this implicit influence that is happening right there in front of you on your tool that you're using to create. So I really wanted to think about leaning into this idea of networked people creating in these modern times and focus on it intentionally. One of my favorite quotes ever is by Frieder Naka in Casey Reese's Century Catalog. He says that artists, and I'm paraphrasing of course, but artists without knowing engage in wonderfully silent conversations with each other. It just happens that way. And what I wanted to do is highlight that and focus that and make those conversations between artists audible, make them intentional, make them explicit. Basically take a group of creatives, put them in close quarters and see what comes out is the general idea. But with creating code-based work, you're working in a technical capacity, you're fixing bugs, you're solving problems, you're thinking about color palettes and the way compositions interact. You're pulling in influences from your own life, from other aesthetics that you've seen and experienced. And you're doing all of this sort of implicitly. So asking these artists to open up their creative processes to each other for a period of time revealed a lot of interesting implicit and explicit influences. So that's been the driving idea, is take these 12 amazing people, put them together, ask them to operate from a place of trust and vulnerability, share every element of their creative process, and see what comes.
Wonderful, thank you. And I do recommend everyone to go read the curatorial statement. It's really beautiful. So I guess to get started, I kind of wanted to make this point that not only are all of the artworks in this exhibition generative, the exhibition itself is generative. And this took me a little while to understand. I'm not a generative artist, and coding is not, something I'm that well versed in. But from what Aaron's kind of explained to me, is it so each of the 12 artists have created 144 generative outputs seeded from unique token hashes. And then artworks with the same token IDs are grouped into sets. So therefore, each set is a generative collection of artwork. We didn't know how they were going to be grouped, which ones were going to go with which. And so it really is a generative exhibition, which feels really special. I've never heard of anything like that before. And I'm just really excited that we're here to talk about them today. So I'd love to pass it to Aaron. I know that he has a few questions for the artists, and we all do as well. So please, Aaron, I'd love to pass it to you to maybe talk about what this means, that it's a generative exhibition, and then just pass it on to you to ask the artist what you want.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So one of the things that was very interesting was the artists have been sharing their work at every stage of the process for the past several months, like I mentioned. And so you're familiar with everyone else's work. I've seen Nicole's and Reva's and everyone's work just evolve over time. But you still sort of see it as an independent effort. It's kind of 12 artworks created in parallel, but with distinct fingerprints. One thing that really struck me was seeing the sets when they were developed, right? None of these artworks are pre-curated, meaning the artist didn't go through and select the outputs. They were randomly generated from the algorithm that they've crafted to create certain output parameter space. And so it was a surprise to see the sets together. For me, it was kind of fascinating going through the sets and saying, oh, in this one, these purple hues really shine through in several of them. In this one, it's all very kind of haunting and minimalist. In this one over here, it's all very bright and joyful. So to me, it was yet another experience of the work, seeing them combined in sets. I'm curious if any of y'all had reactions to seeing your work grouped together like this once the Feral File 2.0 site was live. Or if you have any particular favorite sets and why. Question to the artists.
Dan, I remember you saying on Twitter, was it 54 that was your favorite? Which one did you mention?
I'm just looking in my notes to try to find them. I had a couple of them, and it's number 24 and 58 are some of my favorites. So you look at 24. I like 24 because the animated pieces, there's 3 animated pieces in this collection, and we had an agreement in our group to try to now and again do a monochrome palette, but we had no control over when those monochrome palettes are going to turn up. But on this particular set, then all 3 of those, so yeah, so this is mine, it's using the monochrome one. There's only a few of them. And if you go to Anna's as well, I think it works really well. The styles and the animation is kind of very similar, and I really like that. And then the third, the GAN work as well is just fantastic. So this set I really like because yeah, thirdly is Emergence, the animated pieces in the monochrome I think is great. And then 28, oh no, sorry, 58, set 58. I thought there's some really nice palettes coming together on that one. And as Aaron was saying, this is the first time that I've seen them all together exactly like this. And I was surprised. Yeah, so here we go, the last 2 in the set, just are pairing really well together. I think this whole set works quite well. And I know we've had all these discussions, so we've talked about our work and we've shown our work, and we sort of come together. I mean, the whole group project, it now feels like we've all been involved in it, but then to see them next to each other and the way the pieces are conversing with each other and making them greater than just as they are on their own was fantastic.
I think that's interesting, conversing with each other. You've all been conversing with each other so much, and now you're letting the artwork speak for itself and have its own little visual conversation. It's kind of fun. Anna, I think I saw you go off mute. Maybe did you have a set that you were interested in?
Well, I think I don't have a favorite set yet, but what I've really enjoyed of this way of exhibiting at Reva, I've kind of gone to the website every morning and just pick random sets again and looking at them. And I think has been such a more enjoyable way of looking at the work and looking at them together if they would have been kind of like in separate collections on their own. So that has just been kind of like a nice little thing I've been doing every morning. I haven't discovered my favorite yet, though.
For me, I did it sort of the same as Anna. I just, instead of going them by number, I just randomly started clicking the sets once they appeared. And for some reason, I really got stuck on 127 because I think the majority of them are like bluish, greenish, and it was just really crazy to me that even though there's no intent of getting the same color palettes, this looks like one big collection where everyone tuned the color palettes to be the same. So this one keeps sticking out for me as being one of the most interesting, because for some reason we've managed to all have very similar looking outputs color wise, which is just, there's not a big chance that happens, I guess.
I feel the same way about set 82. I'm biased because my favorite colors are like green and orange, and those 2 hues show up a lot in this one, like especially Beautiful Silence, Resonances, and Text Me When You Get Home, and Beetle Meetin', like those 4 as a set I think really look good together. And then you have Super Bloom, Tessellate, and Waves, I think is and Crosstalk really look good together. So this is what I'm picturing how I would hang all 12 in a grid. And this one to me jumps out as one that's like easy for me to partition into that grid because I know which 4 would go where. They all kind of, like Aaron was saying, they kind of talk to one another through palette and through composition, especially like Resonances and Text Me When You Get Home. You see like these refractions, like ripples on a pond on Resonances, and that kind of mirrors the refractions and reflections that you see in the glass structures in Text Me When You Get Home. And you see that across all the sets. And Oscillation and Beetle Meetin', I'm not saying that properly, probably. Those 2, I don't know if it's just because they're right next to one another, but those 2 and basically every single set look amazing as a pair together. I just love how the pieces talk to one another through color and composition.
Yeah, I also found number 82 is looks so special because they all have green and orange tones. But later, actually, I have walked through all the 144 editions and I pick 90 as my favorite. Yeah, 90. I don't quite I don't quite can express why I choose this one, but I thought there are connection between each piece, and they look balanced and also vibrant on the whole set. Yeah, actually, I particularly love the one that the Nadieh's one. That piece, like there is a lake in the center, and also there's like the mirror of the whole the other side of the world. Yeah, I think this is very interesting.
One thing that Chris Coleman mentioned in the chat is by letting these sets and the outputs individually emerge unedited, how that's a testament to faith in your works. I completely agree with that. I always joke and say that you have to trust the pseudo random number generator gods when you're making a generative system like this. And I feel like you all did that in an individual sense, but also in this group sense, showing these sets. I'm curious about that confidence in your system, that trust in your artwork. How do you get to that point? And then also in this group setting, I'm curious if you've individually become more or less confident after sharing so much of your process, so much more of your process than you would normally share with these other individuals. So did you find yourself becoming more or less confident, and how do you reach that point of confidence in your own artwork?
I think it's funny because sometimes I wasn't really confident about the work I was making, or at least some of the decisions that I was making. But being able to share them within this group and having like really direct feedback compared to when you maybe post something to your social media while you're working on it, allowed me to see maybe pieces of my project that I wouldn't have liked as much otherwise, and that I wouldn't have worked out as much as I did, because everyone was trying to push each other so much. So it's given me more confidence to try out new things. And that's also why I think my project is maybe slightly different from work that I originally make, because I was pushed in that direction by the other participants.
Yeah, I think also like for me, this was the first time I've made like this many pieces of artwork, or like attempted like this big of a project. And especially coming from like the AI generated artwork world, and like using GANs and having like used them for the past couple of years. Like usually with AI generated stuff, like curation is like a huge part of it, where you're like, I generated like 50 things, but only like 3 of them are actually good. So for this particular exhibition, it was kind of like a pretty novel challenge to be like, I'm going to do 0 curation and just like try to make every single output of the GAN good and part of the same family. And I think that, yeah, like that being a constraint, a really unique constraint, led to different ways in which I like created work for this exhibition. So I like spend a lot of time making my data set really good and really like uniform, and then also put everything in monochrome at the end, and then also like did some other things to try to make sure like every single output was like good, and there was like no things that if I were like a human curator at the very end would be like, we'll just like toss this one to the trash. So yeah, I think this, yeah, I really enjoyed like working on N=12 with everyone here, because of like, yeah, just sort of like the scale and like the unique challenge of it. And it's really great.
Lia, I know that you are an AI researcher at Carnegie Mellon's Robotics Institute, and you've got all this experience educating folks on AI models and how to use them ethically, and all this wonderful depth of knowledge there. I'm curious if any of that bled into the way you approached, working on the system that you created for this project, or are your research and creative side separated, or do they blend?
Yeah, there's I'm like trying to mash them as closely as they can be. Because yeah, I think like my entire life I've been both technical, but then also have this side of me that like it feels like I can't not make art, or else I'll like go crazy. and like, yeah, have been trying to like mash those two and bring them closer and closer together. Like my research is also related to creative AI and generative AI. Yeah, and I think that, yeah, like having, I think, more experience with the models over the past like 5 or so years, I think it's kind of like learning a medium. And then once you like learn the medium, then you know different ways in which you can like poke and prod it in interesting ways. For this, like n equals 12 or emergence, my series, like each piece comes out at a different moment in time of the training process. And time is sort of like a theme of the piece itself. Yeah.
Wonderful. That's right. I think I remember you saying that you trained a set, and then each segment, each artwork is like a piece in time. So it's sort of kind of connected to this one larger output or larger artwork or model. And in the same way, Elsif did a similar but very different approach, where if you take each of the tokens next to each other, it creates one large artwork, one scene. I really enjoyed scrolling through those and seeing the connections between pieces. Elsif, do you have anything to add about what drove you to create, something larger than just individual artworks? And actually, she said that she doesn't want to talk earlier, so I probably shouldn't poke.
Hi, I'm sorry. I was trying to figure out how to turn on my mic on the phone in Zoom. So yeah, I guess part of it is just that joining this group has been a really unique and exciting opportunity, and it made me think about this connectedness, like just being part of something bigger. And I feel like for all long-form generative arts, it's kind of each piece is part of something bigger, right? Like you feel connected to the whole collection. And in Super Bloom, I try to kind of heighten this idea of connectedness, of owning a piece of something bigger. Even though you only have this small part of it, you still feel not just connected to all the other artworks in the series, but to the collectors as well. Yeah. Sorry.
That's perfect.
Thanks.
No, it's perfect. Lia, something you mentioned actually gave me some thoughts. You talked about the technical approach and then the creative approach. That's something I think about a lot. Is everybody here, all of you artists, are both technologists and creatives, right? You're engineers and artists. You're someone who can write code, debug a system, and also someone who can dream and ideate in this like infinite world. Which means when you were working together, you were sharing code and functions and technical approaches, which then influence the aesthetics and vice versa. I'm curious if any of you all had a specific code that you used from someone else. Or that was influenced by someone else, I suppose.
For me, I have multiple pieces of my project that I can relate back to either advice or code that was given by someone else. At the very start, I know that Peter has helped me a lot by providing some sort of algorithm that eventually helped me to define the layers, the different shapes and layers that are there in my project. And then much further on, I had Nadieh giving me feedback mostly on how to maybe add shadow or a bit more depth. And I've spoken about this before, but that resulted in me trying out what she asked me to do, and with the feedback of the others. And eventually it turned into the sort of messy feature that my project has. And I can directly relate that back to the conversations I've had with Nadieh and Melissa and others providing me samples of their code.
Art, do you want to talk a bit about the title of your piece? Oh, sorry, Nicole, go ahead.
I was just going to jump in and say that I also benefited from Peter's help with his pseudo random number generator, which I think a few of us are using, but also with color conversion. So he helped me out with a really neat little function to convert from linear to sRGB, or from sRGB to linear. Now I can't think, I'm on the spot and I can't think. It was one of those conversions, and it really just helps the color pop. Like everything looked a little bit flat before, but once I did that color conversion, the darkened and the brightened, and everything kind of just popped a lot more. So those are a couple things that Peter helped with for me specifically.
Wonderful, Peter. Oh, please go ahead.
No, yeah, sorry. I wanted to get into the title question before Nicole's answer. It's pronounced beeldelementen, and I like to give difficult Dutch names to my project. And it means pictures, elements. It was also influenced by Peter, yeah, that's how it's pronounced. Just something I wanted to explain.
It means pixel, basically, right? Or pixels. It's the Dutch word for pixels, but it's only got the vowel E, which is something I like about the word.
I really like to see, Bart, in yours, these sort of subtextures as references to like previous movements. Maybe I notice these concentric circles giving me sort of an op art more kind of a feel when they're layered like this. And it reminds me, in RalenArc's project, she used the print 10 texture almost, right? The forwards and backwards slashes layered. And I really enjoy seeing these echoes from other artistic movements appear in your work. And I think you handled it very well with these off-centered concentric circles.
Thank you. I was very much inspired by another Dutch artist, early computer artist, Peter Struijken. Might be worth looking into at some point, but his work is a big inspiration for me as of late, which I can also relate a little bit back to the concentric circles and some of the patterns that I've used.
I'm curious from the rest of the artists, what was different about working in this group setting versus working as an individual? What were some of the things that you had to change or that you learned during the process?
One thing I learned is what I consider to be a bad idea is not necessarily a bad idea. I went down a few different paths and I wasn't really sold on any of them, but I had this other old project that I liked, but I wasn't completely, very passionate about. And I showed that during one of the critiques, and people said you should really push forward with this idea. It's a good concept. It's a good idea. You should explore it more. So something that I originally thought was a bad idea was maybe not necessarily that bad of an idea because it ended up being the final artwork. So one thing I learned is not to throw any ideas away. I mean, kind of nurture them and allow yourself to explore those ideas and share those ideas with people while they're still works in progress. Especially share them in a space that you feel safe and open to criticism and feedback from. That's what one of the big things I got out of this group.
I think I had a similar experience as Nicole, where there was kind of a day where I felt I didn't get really far, although I did make a lot of kind of like sketches that for me didn't really go anywhere, and I share them with the group, and people then do pick up certain things in the work and say like, oh, but this is really cool, or like, hey, something is happening here, where I was already like, okay, this is a dead end, and that kind of like pushed me on to be like, oh, maybe there's like another thread that I can pull from here. So while at the same time there was kind of definitely a space where I felt very comfortable just sharing works in progress and sketches, I also felt being part of a group, I became a lot more intentional about the work in a way that throughout the whole process, I was constantly asking myself a little bit more questions, because you're going to explain it to somebody else again. So you first have to explain it to yourself. But kind of having that accountability of other people that you're explaining it to all the time, I think really, really helped me a lot in creating this work.
Yeah, I got similar feelings. Yeah, I think working in this group is totally different from those normal group show. Like, I mean, the normal group show is like there is a topic and every invited artist pick one of their previous work or create a new one to put into the collection. But in our group, this is a total different experience. We get to know each other well, and we feel more safe in this environment. So, and that's come to the end that I think everyone has stepped forward a bit, like creating something that is different from what we created before. I think many artists have mentioned it, and I remember Dan has talked about this in his video.
Which is a great video, by the way. I would encourage anybody to go check out Rev Dan Catt's Twitter or YouTube video and YouTube channel and find that video where he dives deep into the process. Lots of fun information as always. Thanks for sharing that, Dan. I'm curious if any of y'all had questions for each other, the artists.
Speaking of Dan, I'm going to pick on Dan and I'm going to ask him, where did you get the inspiration from the story that you're telling within your artwork? It's about something about like if the internet didn't evolve the way it did and we were stuck on BBSs. It really resonated with me hearing that because that's where I started my internet life is with BBSs. My neighbor ran a BBS and we may or may not have shared programs and software through that BBS that may or may not have been of legal means. But anyway, that was like the very beginning of my internet life was going on these texts with, ASCII art, text-based websites, although they weren't websites, they were bulletin boards. So I was just curious where you got the idea, where that idea came from, where that inspiration came from for that story.
Dan, you're muted.
There we go. That's better. Is that better?
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Yeah, I just wanted to run my history through when I first started using computers with an 8-bit machine, and then exactly to those BBSs where it was all text-based. And that was around the time that Doom, the computer game, was coming out as well. And that was cracked. And there was these NFO files that had all the information about them. And those had all this amazing ASCII art in it. And we quickly moved beyond that. As soon as the web came out, then people could put actual art on websites. And it just made me have that feeling of what happens if that never happened? But people just kept evolving that text-based medium. And we got to this point we're at now with generative art, but it never had a user interface. It never had a front end. It just carried on getting more elaborate versions of text. So this is very much based on old 8-bit computers, but also pulling in through the latest GANs and the AI art and trying to pull this thread between them. And then also finding the place where the art sits in the middle. As an artist, I think what we do is we try to push the edge of where we can get to. The things coming up in the future are slow. So AI generative art is kind of slow. You type something in, it takes a while to generate. But we're trying to do things in real time in the browser. So you kind of have to pick a simpler version of them. So I'm trying to go through pre-generated images, real-time generated stuff with the stories, and then this old ASCII art. So that's where I'm sitting with this.
If I could ask a follow-up question, is the poem, like, do you have the poem written somewhere? Like, is it in like a text form?
It isn't a text form. It might be included in all the files. There's a file. It might not be actually. I asked ChatGPT-4 to come up with this story of the BBC Micro stuck in the Doom hell, and then trying to program its own way out of hell by writing code to create a portal. That was just the fun story behind it. And then I got it to generate that like 10 times for these short stories. And then I'm using a Markov chain to then look at all the words and the frequency that the words appears and then create these new statements coming through. So it's kind of remixing. It's this idea of taking, like coming from music, it's sampling bits and it's remixing them and it's rearranging them. So everybody, there's 144 different versions of the same story. The modern AI that we talk about now has the ability to generate new text that wasn't originally there. But to keep this one fast, it's just basically working with the story that I gave it. So it won't create anything new, but it will swap them all around in sort of sensible ways. I hope that explains it a little bit. But is the text in there? No, it's just got the frequency of all the words appearing. So if you take 3 or 4 words, you can see all the words that would come after it. You could reverse engineer the original story, I think. Maybe I'll publish it somewhere. But it's not a very good story, it has to be said.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, it would be interesting to even read it, even if it's not a great story, just to see. Peter, I'd love if you could talk a bit about the title of your piece, Balls to the Walls. I learned what that means yesterday, outside of what I originally thought. So it'd be great to hear you chat about it.
Well, to be honest, I didn't really know what it means either, but it's quite literal. There's in every image, there's a bunch of balls and they are stuck to the walls. It is based on the concept of a sphere packing, which is related to an old generative art technique called circle packing, which creates these very interesting sort of fractally patterns, and I wondered what that would look like in 3D using spheres. So that's one part of my exploration for this work, and the other one, it kind of relates to, there was a thing that popped in my mind when Aaron asked a question about confidence way back at the start of the discussion. It was my algorithm, actually, it generates many camera viewpoints from all kinds of randomly generated scenes, and it throws away the bad ones. It's called rejection sampling. So this is a way I feel sort of confident that all the outputs are good, because I looked through a lot of them, and if there were bad ones appearing, I would add I would tweak the rejection rules. And this way you get a lot of very different camera viewpoints from a sort of limited scene. It is always 3 walls and 1 protruding rectangular block. But by varying the camera angles in sometimes quite extreme ways, a lot of different viewpoints are evoked. And
I thought there was something about an airplane.
Yeah, well, Aaron looked it up for me. Where does the term balls to the walls come from? And apparently it's from early airplane vocabulary. I don't know. It was just the title that kept on coming back in my head, and I asked the rest of the group, is this a stupid title? Because it just keeps popping up in my head, and people said, no, go with it. So I'm going with it.
You're going balls to the walls with it, huh?
The feeling that this project gives me is like when you're reading the book House of Leaves, which is a story of a house that's sort of constantly expanding. There's a door that appears in someone's house, they go into it in these dark hallways. It becomes a sort of like labyrinthine mystery of doom feeling. And these give me the same exact feeling that I got as if I was peering through a keyhole in the House of Leaves. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I didn't read that book myself, but there is some sort of that I've read about it. But one of the inspirations for this series is also the movie Cube, which is it's about a group of 6 people, and they find themselves in an infinite maze made from cubicle rooms. Some of them have death traps in them, and they don't know why they're there. But the fascinating thing about the movie was something I learned later. Well, there's a lot of fascinating things about the movie, by the way. It's really cool. But the way that it was shot is they only have like 1.5 cubicle room, but they use like different lights and camera angles to really give the suggestion of a infinite maze. And that kind of fascinated me when I was trying to find a way to get different types of compositions and camera viewpoints.
That's a great trick. I'm curious if now that you've cracked open this parallel between cinema and generative artwork, if there will be other tricks that bridge as a pretty good source, I think. To the audience, if y'all, since we're heading close to time here in the next 10-15 minutes, if y'all want to ask questions in the chat while the artists keep asking them each other questions, please do so. And Bart, I'm going to pick on you because I know you did your homework and came up with some questions for the rest of the folks. If you don't mind going for it.
Of course. So I was wondering for Lia, because I know that you've added a bunch of bonus files to your project, and considering each of the artists will have their own set as well, what can we do with them, and how can we use the files that you're including?
So mine, like, I guess I could expand upon like the concept. But yeah, like Emergence is about like my second generation, like Chinese American heritage. Like my parents were Chinese immigrants. And like the whole series is about like ancestry and archival of the past, like in the way that data sets go into AI models. It's kind of like at this present moment in time, you're like, I need to gather as much as I can that feels representative of like the past and what was created before. And then you like feed that through a neural network, and then it spits out outputs, which are sort of like, I feel like it feels similar to like me today trying to piece together like what is the story of my family, or what happened in like, I don't know, eons past, generations past, where like we have like no records. And so you get this output, which kind of makes sense, but it also kind of doesn't. And there's a lot of information lost in the entire process. And so each of the pieces comes out at a different moment in time of the neural network training process. And so for collectors, like in the zip files that you get, I've included 3 of those different checkpoints. They're pickle files, so it's like a Python pickle file of a StalGAN3 neural network. So it's like a pre-trained model. You can generate new animations with it. You're free to like remix it, do whatever you want with it. Yeah, I'm really a huge fan of like open source and open sharing. So yeah. You can ask me if you have any questions about how to generate animations with like StalGAN models, or how to pre-train your own. Because I think like it all sort of ties in with the idea of like the collective and co-creating stuff together, both like, you know, as we did over the course of N=12, but also opening it up to like all of the collectors and the entire community to be like, here are my files, here's my source code, and then go make more stuff with it. And let's keep those conversations going. Like those like wonderfully silent conversations you were mentioning earlier. Yeah.
I love that. I've no experience using the model myself, but I'll definitely send you a message to mess around with it once I have the files. I like that.
Yeah, please do.
And I had another question for Anna. I really love the dithering effect you've added to your project. And I was wondering if that's something intentional or something you happen to stumble upon during experimenting. Could you elaborate a little bit on how that effect came to be?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm gonna turn my video off for a second. My internet connection is not that great at the moment, but I hope you can hear me. I think this was similar in the story of Melissa's work. I often, when I'm creating work, I go through a process where I'm adding a lot, and then that comes to a point where I started subtracting a lot. When I was working on the project, that stuff in this group have seen, I was actually to approach staff texture, or maybe the texture of a of tapestries. Am I still here?
Yeah, I can still hear you. You sometimes break up a little bit, but
I'm so sorry. But okay, I hope you guys can hear me. But I think as I was working on these quite detailed textures, I then started actually pruning and taking back what doesn't need to be there. But to have something that kind of still reflected maybe this texture in a way, I settled on dithering, when I think still give a lot of depth and shadow, very, yeah, like a truly digital texture instead of a mimicry of a texture.
I think I've heard most of your answer, but yeah, just wanted to say again that I really love the effect. It really adds another layer to your work. And for example, I really loved in set 41, it matched so good with Daniel's project, because they both feel super sci-fi. And that was one of the first sets that I opened, I think. And then I just felt like this feels like we've made similar looking projects, even though it's pure randomness that made these two appear similar like that.
Yeah, so I think it was really cool to see Dan's and then see mine, and I was like, well, what happened here? They have a similar feel to it, and also kind of like that retro computer graphic vibe that wasn't necessarily, definitely a side conversation that
Can I just jump in quickly and answer the question about how collectors should display the work? Because
yeah, I was just gonna jump in and
yeah, we got about,
so please go ahead, carry on.
We've got about 5 minutes, and I'm going to answer the cop out and then pass on to Aaron for it. But as an artist, it's been really interesting watching collectors become curators themselves. There's this kind of collector curator pool, and in digital museums have been trying to do the job, but there's been sudden influx of people who have been doing creation at a very basic level of sort of making collections where they're all the same color, which is fine, and that's fantastic. And then there's people who are starting to take it the next level above and choosing where to put the work and where to display them together. And I think those collectors who are starting to pick out 2 or 3 pieces and then putting them together, either because they work together or because, again, they're making a conversation. There's something about putting 2 different pieces together that are working in slightly different ways. So my cop-out answer for how I think collectors should display them is, I think that they should do a little bit of mini curation themselves and pick maybe 2 or 3 pieces out of a set that they think sort of elicit a good conversation out of it. And the other part of that is they should definitely buy 2 or 3 sets so they can, no, I'm not going to do that one, but I'll pass back over to Aaron, because obviously he's curated the thing as a whole, so he might have some more insight onto creating on a set level.
I think, as always, it's find what resonates with you. I'm one of those people who likes to go to a museum, not read the wall text, and just let the feeling of the artwork kind of happen. I think in one of the earlier Feral File 2.0 conversations, somebody mentioned the word frisson or frisson. It's the first time I've ever heard that word, and apparently it means the emotional feeling or reaction you get when experiencing an artwork. Maybe I'm completely wrong there, but that's what Google tells me. And that is what I think you should base any sort of curation decisions on, is letting the work kind of speak for itself and reacting to it in this kind of aesthetic way. That said, there's a lot of story here behind this particular exhibition. Just looking at the outputs is seeing the final alchemy of what's been happening for the past 7 months between these artists. And so I think it's important for this particular exhibition to get some more context and really understand a bit about what's transpired. This conversation, of course, is an amazing way to do that. Another is the exhibition catalog that Feral Files Bensa put together, an amazing designer. Casey, if you're able to, yep, on the screen, point to where that is and maybe even pull it up if possible to click through. But either way, there's a really beautiful exhibition catalog here. If you go to the info page and scroll down, there's also some wonderful artist bios that you can get more in-depth information about each of the artists. But that exhibition catalog showcases some of the works in progress. You'll see some watercolors from RalenArc. You'll see some sketches from Nadieh, and you'll see works in progress outputs from many of the artists. And you'll be able to read my curatorial statement. That essay really highlights the primary points and tells some of the story that we're trying to convey with this show. I think it's a worthwhile endeavor to scroll through here and enjoy.
Absolutely, and that is free to download on the website, as Casey showed. If you go to the info tab and then scroll down to the downloads, and there were just two questions in the chat that kind of played upon each other. So I just want to go ahead and ask this in the last couple of minutes. We might run a little over. I do apologize for that. This is recorded, so if you do have to leave, this will be available later. But so Chris Coleman asked earlier, what if the order of the set was different? And we were talking about kind of how the different pieces work together, and what we liked about the different pieces in the set. And so he says, what if the order was different for each set, and what if you sort of randomize them so that they displayed differently? And then Heather asked, people were interested when the different works had palette resonances. So do you think it's worthwhile to craft this explicitly as a basis for a set in a collection? And again, you can't break up these sets, but as Dan mentioned, you could buy a couple and then mix and match as you want. But what both of these questions make me think of is actually something that Peter said in a recent interview with Right Click Save to celebrate this exhibition. And Peter said, we all make choices, but so much of generative art. Oh wait, no, sorry, that's not what Peter said. He said, I don't know how co-creation will develop. I think we'll see much more of it, but I don't think it will become fundamental. There is a job for the artist to make choices. You can do anything, but what will it be? And so we all make choices, yes, but so much of generative art places trust in an algorithm. So you do relinquish choice in some way. So as generative artists, and Aaron as the generative artist and the curator of the exhibition, how do you grapple with the what ifs of the output, not only of the pieces, but of the sets themselves?
Personally, I love the idea of that. Back to the silly analogy of the PRNG gods, the pseudorandom number generator gods. They have spoken. This is the fate that we've been given, and we sort of accept it and enjoy it in that way. Of course, shuffling the sets and seeing what could have been is an exciting thing, an exciting idea. I love that, Chris. I think that's what will happen maybe in the weeks following the initial collecting period. I am a big fan, and we talk about this a lot from the art blocks perspective. When you are doing a project on art blocks, you create a mint zero, your first mint, and that sort of becomes the banner for your project. So there's a lot of conversation of should you make mint zero a particularly good output, so that way people get a good understanding of your project. I'm personally, this is a very personal opinion, very against that. I think you should use that as an opportunity to showcase the confidence and trust that you have in the thing that you've created, and let mint zero be whatever it is, or let the sets be whatever they are, let your outputs be whatever they are. And I say that after many months and weeks of toil and late nights of crafting your artwork to be exactly within a particular parameter set. I love to think of generative artists as gardeners, to borrow Brian Eno's phrase. You're sort of pruning your garden as you're working on your system. So it's not like anything can happen. You're constraining what can happen, and trusting that pruning and trusting yourself as a gardener, I think, is a really magical part of this whole adventure that we're doing as generative artists. And so leaning into that and letting the sets be what they are is an exciting part of it. That's just my personal opinion. Love that idea, Chris. I see. So instead of maybe saying Elsif, Daniel, Catt, Nadieh's projects in order, maybe rearranging the order of the projects in the set, that might be a good feature request for FaroFile, to be completely honest.
Yeah, that's good.
Taking notes.
I would really love it if the display on the website would be like randomized instead of the, I don't even know how we came up with this order. I think it's just the order we happen to mint them in, maybe, or, well, I'm not sure.
I actually curated the order that they show in. However, I did that for the FaroFile 1.0 design. Our project helped launch FaroFile 2.0, so we were kind of in this bridge era. So I put these in a particular order to match the layout that was available in FaroFile 1.0. So seeing it in this 2x6 view here is new and interesting. So even though I intentionally put them in a particular order, the way they interact is yet again new because of the FaroFile 2.0 launch, which is beautiful, by the way.
Wonderful. These are all really great suggestions, and thank you all for your responses and your questions for each other. This has been wonderful. Really, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone in the audience who's still here, and to everyone who joined, and to everyone who's listening after to the recording. We really appreciate you. If there aren't any other questions or any other responses, any final thoughts today, the eve of collecting, we can go ahead and close out. So collecting does begin tomorrow at 1400 UTC, which is 4 p.m. Central Europe time, 10 a.m. Eastern, and 7 a.m. Pacific. And so the way that that's going to work is that at the top of the hour, the price of the sets are going to start at 7.2 ETH, and then within the first 30 minutes, they're going to drop incrementally down to 0.72 ETH. And then for the next 23.5 hours, the price will rest at 0.72. And each of the artists will receive an equal share of every set purchased, collected, and every collector will receive 12 tokens, 12 individual artworks, 12 NFTs when they collect. So if there aren't any questions right now, no problem. Feel free to DM us, tweet us, anything, reach out. Lots of different ways to do that. And thank you so much to the artists and to Aaron. Truly, this exhibition is so special and setting the bar so high for FaroFile 2.0. It's been really wonderful to be with you all and to speak about your work. And there are other conversations and other recordings that we have where some other artists where you go into more of your pieces as well. So those are also available, and we'll be making those available on our YouTube. So thank you so much again. Really appreciate you all. Any final words, anyone? Okay.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, everyone. Ciao.
See you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.